Now I know this looks like a generic old tiny laptop, and for the most part you're right. This is my Gateway LT2016u notebook, and I like this little guy. This tiny machine has become my travel device for a number of reasons. For starts, it's very portable, it's only a little over 10 inches, it fits into most travel bags and backpacks. It's also possible to power it up through a cigarette lighter port in a car with a charger adapter. I found this one on eBay for only $9. And lastly, this little machine has been made bootable into 3 different operating systems, giving it massive compatibility for all my needs. In late 2009, Gateway launched this model laptop targeted with the intent of bundling in Verizon Wireless with it. So these laptops support a 3G connection and don't need Wi-Fi at all times to browse the internet, as long as you paid for the service. This laptop retailed for $249, although there seemed to be a rebate to bring it to $149. The real cost of the device came at the expense of the Verizon services. According to LaptopMag.com, the total cost of data over a 2-year contract period with Verizon was $1,440. In reviews, the laptop was seen as average, with remarks of the keyboard and trackpad being ridiculously small, but praising things like the large 6-cell lithium battery they shipped with. With decent port selection too, this device could be used in office environments with ease, allowing SD card, USB, and VGA out connections. This laptop was also praised for its sleek design at the time. However, I have to pick at some of the choices here in the future, with certain aspects that have not held up too well. Now let's take a look at the hardware this tiny machine is packing. Spoiler alert, it's not going to be much. This machine sports an Intel Atom N270 processor running at 1.6 GHz with 1 core and 2 threads. This is paired with 1 GB of DDR2 memory in a SODIMM form factor accessible through an access port on the bottom of the laptop. It has 2 wireless cards, one for the Wi-Fi and one for the 3G connection. Lastly, we have a 160 GB drive that would have come with the device, but mine did not have that, so I've replaced it with a 500 GB drive. As for connectivity, we have 3 USB 2.0 ports, audio in and out jacks, a VGA out, 10100 Ethernet, full-size SD card slot, DC power in, and Kensington lock. For features, you also get a webcam, battery charge indicator light, hard drive activity light, and caps and numlock lights. Along the front bezel, they include a 3G and Wi-Fi activity lights, which are nice touch. And back towards the top, the power button has its own little LED. There isn't a whole lot to see from the full teardown of the board, apart from a little heatsink and a fan that cool the whole system. I repasted mine and actually had to do a little hardware mod for the CMOS battery. These motherboards all come with a soldered CMOS battery, and mine was dead, so I had to replace that. I cut the old one off and replaced it with a socket so I can put a new one on whenever I want. That wraps up the hardware. Let's move on to the software. As the title states, this machine is set up to boot 3 different operating systems, and the first one is Windows XP. This seems to have been the OS of choice for Gateway, since that's what the machine shipped with based on the product key sticker on the bottom. Sadly, the original hard drive did not come with this unit, and I was not able to find a restore image for this, so we got a generic Windows XP install packed with SATA drivers. On top of this, I used a Snappy driver installer to install most of the drivers I needed to get the machine running. Aside from this, I haven't installed many programs outside of 2 browsers, which I might add are almost unusable in 2024. The system memory doesn't seem to max out, so I'm blaming this on the CPU failing to keep up with modern web design. XP overall seems sluggish, and I'm hoping that this wasn't out-of-the-box experience for most users, plus they had to deal with the bloatware that would have come with their version of Windows. My second OS of choice is Ubuntu, although an older version due to the 32-bit support of this system's CPU. This flavor of Linux was super easy to set up and actually runs half decent on this machine. I used it to write the first draft of the script and most of the web browsing when it's with me. It even manages to play YouTube videos somehow, while dropping some frames, but the audio is never choppy, and I'm super impressed with that. This seems like the better option OS going forward for support. The Firefox install works almost immediately after installing, despite being an outdated version of Ubuntu. Our last operating system option is old but gold. I managed to get FreeDOS up and running on this laptop with little trouble. I chose to do this so I could have a DOS emulation machine on the go, and because it's in a device with 2 other operating systems, I can drag and drop files straight into the DOS partition without doing any silly USB disk swapping. I installed this straight into a micro SD card and then used a full-size SD card adapter to fit into the laptop. The micro SD cards were cheaper, so you can't blame me for buying them over regular size. This lets me have a mobile device for all my favorite retro games and ROMs. I even found a Game Boy emulator that works in DOS so I can play my favorite Pokemon games. This cute little laptop sure can be useful, but also has its drawbacks. For starts, its original operating system is pretty much dead. Windows XP support ended years ago, And to kick the system in the knees a bit harder, the CPU only supports 32-bit instructions, limiting the number of apps available for XP. Top that off with the slow Windows performance, and it gets a failing grade from me there. Ubuntu is very usable, but they also abandoned 32-bit versions a little while ago, and as a result, I will never be able to update this distro. It works now, but one day apps like Firefox will no longer support such old versions. It passes here, but is usable, but mostly in a pinch. DOS is a lot of fun, but suffers from two major drawbacks. Firstly, most apps have no sound. This is by no means uncommon for most DOS games, but it means my emulators in DOS are a little less fun with no sound while they work with sound in Windows. The second drawback is the CPU's understanding of DOS is a little silly, and as a result, it just runs at 100% usage and power constantly, so the laptop gets very, very hot and the fans get a little noisy. I truly believe, if no ventilation, this could be a quick road to the CPU's death. One last little annoyance is the laptop supporting only one RAM slot, and with it being DDR2, it only supports a max of one 2GB module. Wrapping it up, I think this little laptop has a ton of potential for fun or everyday use if given to the right person. These little machines are all over eBay and usually found for under $40 shipped. I'd always love to see computers find alternate uses rather than end up in a scrapyard. I hope this inspires you to dig out the old family laptop from the attic or garage and spin it back to life, even if it's for just one last time.